Imagine traveling across the world only to find the seasons have changed and the food is gone. That's the reality for wildlife on the move.
With migratory species, even these small changes can be really catastrophic.
So can a powerful film do what cold, hard data has not?
The science hasn't created the change that we need, and I think we need a different approach.
Coming up, the birds disappearing in record numbers, and some, like vultures, are fighting for survival while doing nature's dirtiest, most essential job.
Vultures need a rebrand. They do an amazing job in cleaning up carcasses, preventing disease spread.
And in East Africa, something truly precious is hanging in the balance. The Serengeti Mara, one of the oldest and greatest wildlife shows on Earth, and one now confronted with modern threats.
The mortalities have risen because of the depletion of food resources as well as water shortages.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now,
without the great Serengeti Mara, the world is infinitely poor.
Birds of a feather, we should stick together. It's a beautiful song by American pop musician Billie Eilish. But check out this beautiful sight. Animals on the move, like the changing of the seasons, their migration represents transformation. But too much is changing. These species are receiving mixed signals from nature. Many birds are migrating too early, with some dying from exhaustion, starvation, or even falling victim to predators along the way. Add the growing threats of pollution and urban sprawl, well, life for migratory species is becoming a lot more difficult. Eley, a conservation photographer, has traveled the globe to document birds. But while in India, he encountered a field strewn with dead cows. Vultures were feeding on them, which is what vultures do as scavengers. But it was what that remained that was out of the ordinary. One of your very first posts that are pinned looks at your work in Rajasthan in northern India, where you visited a carcass dumping site where hundreds and maybe thousands of vultures all feed. And you saw something extraordinary when it came to plastics. Talk about that.
So I went to a carcass dumping site in Vignes in Rajasthan, and actually a story unfolded there which was really unique. There's about 4,000 vultures there, Egyptian, Cinereus, Eurasian griffon, Himalayan griffon, so 4 different species, steppe eagles, black kites, huge bird of prey population there. And the carcass dumping site was really interesting, but what the story unfolded was that essentially the cows that are bought there as the carcass dumping site, essentially when the vultures and the stray dogs have their fill, the bones are taken away. What's left is a really stark scene, which are mounds and mounds of plastic, so up to 20 kilograms of plastic. And on first inspection, you think it might just be a rubbish dump, but actually that's all coming from the stomachs of the cows, which I just thought was a really interesting viewpoint on. We talk a lot about ocean plastics in conservation, and there's a lot of focus on what's going on in our oceans, but we're not necessarily talking about things like this, where obviously cows are roaming the streets in towns and cities in India, but they've got nothing to eat and they're consuming plastic.
You've been getting a lot of pushback on that post. People have been criticizing you for revealing what's there. But speak about generally the misunderstandings around vultures. People are quite often grossed out by them, but they're a very important bird, aren't they?
Vultures need a rebrand. I think they're incredibly important for our planet, for our ecosystems. They do an amazing job in cleaning up carcasses, preventing disease spread. But I think in the media, we've always kind of we have a bit of a view on what vultures should be perceived as, but actually they're enigmatic birds. But they're fairly resilient. But what I tried to document with my photography with vultures is the fragility of these birds as well. And I think
how are they fragile? I understand their stomachs has one of the most potent acids of any in the animal kingdom. How are they fragile though?
Yeah, so you really see their fragility when they come in collisions with power lines, and the people that are rescuing them from the vulture organization Volpro that I was talking about. You really see their fragility, and actually they are incredible birds. They're huge, powerful birds, but actually, when you're seeing them and they're being brought into the rehabilitation centre, you're really seeing that fragility firsthand. And actually, I think they need a lot more respect. And there are certain species of vulture across the planet that maybe have got 5 years left. If you take the hooded vulture, the IUCN Red List rated it as least concern about 10 years ago. Now it's critically endangered, and estimates are suggesting that 5 years you might not see a hooded vulture left on the planet. And I think this is a really important point to stress when it comes to vultures is their importance can't be downplayed, and just because they look and are perceived to look in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that they should be kind of pushed in that character.
So what I'm getting from you so far, Chris, is that in part because of human expansion, the positioning of electric power lines, for one, vultures are dying. Are they also eating the plastics that they've been finding in these cows' stomachs?
Well, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about that. That obviously that was very much an India centric focus on that with the species of vulture. In Africa, the challenges are power line collisions, certainly for Cape vultures, issues with carcass poisonings, and also lead poisoning as well. Habitat loss, everything's having an impact on these birds. And, you can take any single bird species probably across the globe that finds itself as endangered or critically endangered, and identify a multitude of factors that are impacting the population of those birds. Take the African penguin as an example. That bird has just been uplisted from endangered to critically endangered. There's a multitude of challenges that have been faced on the coast of South and Southern Africa to protect that African penguin, and they're saying 2035 is the year that we might not see one because of overfishing. Is a big one, but climate change as well is having a massive impact on the food source for them of sardines and anchovies in the ocean. So I think every single bird species at the moment needs our support, and I think they're a great way to understand the health of the planet is to look at bird populations and the impact that it's having. But when it comes to the plastic issue, it's unsure whether those birds, this is kind of, I guess, one of the first times that's really been properly documented about the challenges those birds are having. I'm unsure whether there are any studies going on about that at the moment, but certainly your mind does kind of shift in that direction, because you're thinking, well, if this is happening to seabirds across the planet through consumption, is it going to have an impact on vulture species as well?
And that's an interesting point you made earlier, that potentially you can tell the health of the planet by the health of the bird populations in certain ecosystems. Do you find that to be true, though? In your travels, when you go to these environments where you go to spot birds, do you see a decline in those ecosystems and hence a reduction in the bird populations? What does it look like out there?
I don't think it actually needs me to travel too far. I can step outside my own doorstep. Here in the UK, we're one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. You're looking at roughly around 50% of our original biodiversity still is here in the UK. That's compared to roughly around 72% is the global average. We are in the UK one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And I'll give you an example. A project I'm embarking on to photograph over the next kind of 4 to 5 months is all around the common swift. The common swift is a migratory bird that travels across Africa to nest here in the UK, but because of developments of buildings here in the UK, they're losing a lot of their nest sites. A depletion in insect populations, which they feed on, means that the common swift has seen a 50% decline in the last 30 years. And I think, so I'm going around the country to embark on a project to look at those individuals. So I really look at human endeavour to save some of these species. That includes people that are rescuing and rehabbing 70 swifts in their own living room, people who are building swift boxes to push out into local communities. I think we've seen that here in the UK, and you don't actually need to travel too far. Actually, just looking outside your own doorstep and going into your own garden. We do here in the UK have the big garden bird watches where people can document the species, and there's a definite correlation over the last few years that with bird populations decreasing. So it doesn't need, and I think also as a conservation photographer, I need to think about the planet as well. So I'm always thinking about how I can lessen my carbon footprint as well when I go out to do these projects. And these projects are super important. But actually, if I can do something on my own doorstep, like a project with the Common Swift, and document that, that's equally powerful. And thinks about my own carbon footprint as a conservation photographer as well. I think some of these issues are really important to face up to and front up to as well.
If you've seen Disney's Lion King, you might remember the wildebeest stampede scene. This is where Simba, young Simba, is trapped in a dried up riverbed. Zazu is flapping his wings trying to get to Simba's father Mufasa to inform him of this chaos that's unfolding. That scene was scary for Simba, obviously, but it actually features a natural annual occurrence, the wildebeest migration. Every year, millions of these herbivores and others make their way across the Serengeti plains in search of fresh grass.
The wildebeest migration is an epic display of survival and instinct, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors annually to witness one of nature's 7 wonders.
It's a very spectacle. Amazing.
Yes, very special. We've enjoyed seeing them and so many animals at the same time. It's great.
In the Serengeti Mara ecosystem spanning northern Tanzania and southern Kenya, over 1.5 million wildebeest, along with zebras, gazelles, and other antelope, embark on a journey in search of fresh grazing and water.
I guess they've got a good way of sensing where it could be raining. So after the rain starts, when they come into Kenya, and that is when it's not raining in Tanzania. So I think the rains also triggers them, and the weather.
Beginning in May or June, the herds move northwest after the rainy season. Their journey is dangerous, as they must cross rivers filled with Nile crocodiles and fend off predators like lions and hyenas. Some wildebeest form safety in numbers groupings, creating huge, dense herds to protect themselves from predators, while others become decoys, sacrificing themselves to give the herd a better chance at survival.
But 100,000 are lost. First, there's the drowning, predation by crocodiles as they cross the river. Others, out of sickness, they die. Others, maybe like the very young and weak ones, can be trampled upon in the process of movement, or they are left behind. Others are predated upon by specifically, most commonly, lions and hyenas.
They don't just follow instinct, they also respond to subtle ecosystem changes, like the scent of fresh grasses and the sun's position in the sky. Some scientists even believe they use the stars to navigate at night. But this ancient migration pattern is being disrupted by rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall, and human activities.
At this time of the year, we witness quite big herds of migration from Serengeti into the Masai Mara. But this time around, they came late. It was about the weather.
Frequent and intense droughts has led to shifts in the animals' food and water sources, so the wildebeest are sometimes forced to stray from their traditional migration routes, increasing risk of being killed or starving to death.
The drought has resulted in the deaths of the following species of wildlife. Wildebeest, we've lost a total of 512 animals. The mortalities have risen because of the depletion of food resources and as well as water shortages.
A proposed highway through the Serengeti and increased land use changes threaten to fragment migration routes, placing the wildebeest in great danger.
At least 300 scientists who've been asked the question say it is highly likely or certain that it will lead to the collapse of this great ecosystem. How we can be so short-sighted to risk losing that, I just don't know. It's a one of a kind. Without the great Serengeti Mara, the world is infinitely poor.
If this ecosystem collapses, the migration could cease to exist, and the survival of the wildebeest and countless other species in peril.
Have you ever seen the wildebeest migration in East Africa, Miki?
No, never.
Can you imagine if we weren't just looking at this from a distance, but actually a part of it in real life? You'll understand what I'm getting at in a second.
My name is Sipoka Zempofu. I'm a puppeteer, I'm a performer. I am also a puppet maker. We are at Ukwanda's workshop. The project is the collaboration between Ukwanda and the work. We are busy making the prototype of a kudu. We've been exploring materials and exploring the ways of doing things that can be simple. Even in other countries, people can just go and recycle the material and work.
My name is Sipo. His name is Mola. I'm a puppet maker, I'm a puppet performer. I'm working on a prototype of a gazelle. Normally we use cane in our puppets, but now we've got a challenge. What is nice about puppets is that it's easier, obvious, it's easy to make, easy to fix. Also, it's a recycled material. You can just get it anywhere and bring it to the workshop and just hoy the work.
My name is Luanda Nokodwane. I'm working in these projects of heads. This one is the gazelle animal that you're going to attach on the small puppets on the table over there. Here we've got the kudu head. This is the first head that I made.
This is a moment within a context of a much bigger project, which is the herds created by the Walk Productions. In the spring of 25, we plan to walk with hundreds of animals from Central Africa all the way to Norway. So this is our first animal out of hundreds of animals that we will design. The workshop here have been working for the last couple of months, partly to create the kudu, but also to understand new materials. What can we use? What are the technologies we need to apply on these materials to create a project that tackles this issue of climate change?
Who came up with this idea and why?
Well, I can firmly say it wasn't WWF who came up with this idea. It was the fantastic, innovative, and artistic herds team. And I really celebrate the drive to the urgency for action around climate change has never been more apparent. We are seeing it in every ecosystem around the world, yet the science hasn't created the change that we need. And I think we need a different approach, and reaching people by art, by mobilization, by really telling the story. I have actually perhaps hoped that will create the change that science hasn't so far. So we are really embracing and supporting the Herds initiative and helping to shine a light on really what climate change means in reality, what it means for the species that we live with and the people that live and share those ecosystems with them.
We haven't, at least on this show, covered a lot how migratory animals are affected by climate change. How would you say they are, particularly those on the African continent?
Migratory species, species that migrate naturally anyway, are particularly at risk because their whole life cycle is so vulnerable to change. So what we're seeing now is birds starting to migrate too early because they're getting the wrong cues from nature. We're starting to see completely different patterns and timings of when the right vegetation exists in the ecosystem, such as where the wildebeest migration occurs. And with migratory species, even these small changes can be really catastrophic, because if species start migrating too early, they get to their destination exhausted and they haven't eaten for a significant amount of time, but the resources they've come for are not yet available. So I think what we're seeing is migratory species in particular are vulnerable. And those species are also incredibly important for ecosystems. They transfer nutrients across large distances. They perform incredible functions such as seed dispersal that keep our forests healthy and carbon dense and able to mitigate climate change better than otherwise. So it's a kind of cascade, right? Climate change is impacting these species, and the decline in those species is driving further climate change. So unless we stop, unless we act, that cascade is just going to accelerate.
I'm sure you know, Wendy, I mean, across the world, we've been seeing longer summers, or rather it seems summers are bleeding into winter, warmer winters. Spring is coming weeks early. I've tried on my end to explain to people that, yeah, the weather might be great right now, but this is indicative of a declining climate. How do you put it into words to help people understand that this warmer winter is not a good thing?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I'm obviously British. You can probably tell that from my accent, but I live here in Kenya, in Nairobi. When you live in a place where getting warmer is so catastrophic, and here we've seen absolutely devastating droughts that have been catastrophic for people, for wildlife, for everyone, it's very obvious. And it's very obvious why climate change, if we don't reverse it, is going to be a disaster for everyone. But if you live in a colder climate, I mean, I see it all the time. Well, a bit warmer won't be a bad thing. But I think that the critical thing to remember is everything will change, everything will move. And what may seem like a positive really won't be in the long term. And so the only way for our planet to be able to sustain itself in the face of the climate change we've already seen is to adapt rapidly whilst taking firm action to reduce emissions to stop the problem getting worse, because the problem will be bad for people wherever they sit on the planet.
Before I let you go, Wendy, just looking back at the trailer, I noticed that obviously these humans, they are puppeteers carrying these animal puppets that are made of a variety of resources, materials. But what I got from it, it seems to be a metaphor that, you know, yes, we're at fault, but we have to play a greater role in carrying, in taking these animals where they need to be, and maybe recreating and creating the conditions again for their normal migratory patterns to continue. That's what I got from seeing them carry these animals. What do you think needs to be done for the animals? I mean, I guess to be affected less. I know we have to burn fewer fossil fuels, stop cutting down the rainforests. But in terms of regular people, everyday life, what would you recommend to someone who, for example, lives in the UK or lives in Chile, in the Caribbean, in North America? The regular person who is not exposed to these migratory patterns or really unaware of them, what can they do on a day-to-day basis to help the rest of the planet?
This is a great question. And you're totally right. The number one need is to bring those emissions down and prevent climate change getting worse. But we also need to adapt because there's so much change already happening. And a great way to think about this is just help people and wildlife to still have the ability to move. If you're an elephant and there's been drought throughout history, of course, it's not a new thing. The challenge now is it's more severe and more frequent. But elephants are very used to moving large distances to find the resources that they need. The challenge today is often they can't move where they used to. There are farms in the way, there are roads, there is rail, there is people living. And so we can greatly help a species' ability to adapt to climate change by just ensuring they have pathways to move. And it's easy to think about if you think about an elephant, but this also applies to a city in London. There's a huge amount of effort to create that ability for wildlife to move, whether it's bees or other pollinators or any kind of wildlife, simply enabling there being either corridors between parts or hotspots that species can jump through, just help wildlife move and help people move as well, because people are going to need to move to adapt. So I think connectivity is really the key to me. And I think that's a core message that HERDS will really bring to life with these incredible puppets moving around the planet.
Yeah, with urban species expanding, no doubt these corridors, nature corridors, are more necessary than ever. Wendy, it was a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your interest in this great story.
And that's our show. Until next time, bye.